Hey, how you doing? Name's Will. No! No! No!
You ever dealt with that one individual? The kind that'll create chaos and use whatever means necessary to diverge the blame to someone other than themselves, most likely you. And for whatever reason that may be, you take the full brunt and punishment of it while that one person walks scot-free with that stupid victorious grin on their face. Family member or that one guy in class you really don't like, it's an infuriating feeling. Of course, risking taking matters into your own hands could only validate their fake innocence even more. And if it were the other way around and you happen to be the guy that I'm about to talk about in this video, I bet it felt amazing. And how often did you get away with it? And if a lot, well, congrats. Oh, and believe me, I've been there, but let's be honest, if your parents happen to wise up like mine do, no, Dad, no, please. It almost never ends well anyway. And yet never has a particular Foster's episode made me feel so vindictive. Look, I don't know if there were a ton of other episodes that were debatably bad or rarely worse, but I don't think there's a single episode in Foster's Run that actively frustrated me more than Everyone Knows It's Bendy. That being said, Foster's Home is that show that'll stick out to me as one of the more memorable Cartoon Network originals I hold high regard for. It was one of those animations that looked vividly different from what I was normally accustomed to, coming from the same mind behind the highly popular Powerpuff Girls. At the time, it felt like there was just nothing like it. The concept of imaginary friends with the mind of Craig McCracken gave creation to a very colorful cast of characters. Wilt is my absolute favorite. He just reminded me so much of myself. Tall, nice, sometimes really awkward, and he could play basketball. Yeah, that's one thing I can't relate to. I was awful. But let's be honest, no show can be good 100% of the time. Proof of that being Everyone Knows It's Bendy. All I can remember was that mischievous little grin and that pure devotion to hoping that any sort of accountability was held. Yeah, that reminds me of another specific episode. The main focus of this plot is around Bendy. I don't really need to explain much. Just look at this picture. I know, I do too. He's a one-dimensional character only meant to cause hell for everyone around him. But what if I told you Bendy wasn't the worst character? Don't get me wrong, Bendy really sucks, but Mr. Harriman and Frankie were so vividly out of character that it damn near felt robotic. They practically wasn't even the characters they were supposed to be. They were just there to just turn a blind eye and help convey the plot for Bendy. And I like Frankie. She's my favorite non-imaginary character in the show. But oh boy. Just check out this plot, and you'll see exactly what I mean. No. Turn that shit off. A family arrives at Foster's to drop off their son's imaginary friend, Bendy, as he was accused of a series of mischief and rule breaking. Explaining their disdain to both Mr. Harriman and Frankie, Frankie hints to Mr. Harriman that the child is showing signs of guilt, and immediately began making their assumptions. They question the parents and they find that they didn't have any real proof that Bendy did all of these things, and took their son's word for it. Instead of questioning the son, they send him out of the room and immediately come to the conclusion that the son most likely blamed everything on Bendy. And the parents say that one common line whenever they get offended, and they be like, "Why, I never," and then they just leave. Now, if the son had turned around and showed that crazy grin that Bendy is notoriously known for, it would have foreshadowed Bendy just a little bit better. It may have told a more clear story about the possible negative influence the son may have had on Bendy or vice versa. But nope, Bendy of course puts on an act to make the two pity him. And it works, hook, line, and sinker. Meanwhile, Bloo and his friends are playing the GameCube. I bet they were playing NBA Street, that game was dope. And Eduardo thinks they're playing Metroid. Bendy strolls into the room and Bloo offers for him to join them in the friendly game. Then he just smashes the vase and just runs out the room.
What the heck was that all about?
The group is stunned and they're trying to figure out what the hell happened. This is my first real issue with this episode. Bendy sprints out of the room and Harriman just strolls in the exact same doorway he got finished running through and somehow seeing nothing. This is like a common thing that just sort of happens, like if they have the load into the next screen like in a Resident Evil game. Mr. Harriman calls Frankie and she confronts the group and asks who broke the vase. I'm gonna be real, and I'm sure everyone would agree with me on this. This whole thing would have been resolved the moment Wilt spoke up. But nope, I guess not. Bendy does a Grammy-winning impression of someone who isn't guilty who's actually guilty.
What? Why, I would never.
Yeah, anyone who draws out a syllable like that is immediately lying.
Knock over, but I was in the. Oh no, it's happening again!
You guys, how could you?
Yeah, because four imaginary friends playing NBA Street all colluded together to randomly just smash a vase. Of course it works, despite them all literally sitting on the opposite side of the television. And those are CRTs. Those things are concrete blocks with screens. You aren't knocking anything off of that without a certain amount of force. Then we get a lengthy montage of Bendy using Harriman and Frankie's trust against pretty much every main imaginary friend. It's all just a series of Bendy breaking a ton of rules around the house and routinely groveling every time he's caught in the act until the blame is shifted. Also, Bloo is not entirely bright, but here he's just incredibly and conveniently stupid. He just consistently puts himself in a bad position every single time, of course to Bendy's advantage, and every single victim is on punishment, including Wilt. Come on now. Bloo attempts to try to catch Bendy in the act, only to further incriminate himself and give Bendy exactly what he wanted. They do, however, try to plant a trap. Then Bloo just has short-term memory loss. Why would you give her the camera? Bloo, of course, takes the fall again. Even though the picture doesn't exactly show Bloo breaking the window, he's just holding the bat looking confused. And then, of course, Bendy just sucks up the Harriman and Frankie. Listen to this believable performance.
I just want to live here and be a good citizen and live in peace and harmony under the caring guidance of the loving and beautiful Miss Frankie and the intelligent and very handsome Mr. Harriman. But I am cursed!
Yeah, you are. They're back on punishment again, and they all decide to call it quits to Bloo's frustration. And when Bendy gets on the intercom to mock Frankie and Mr. Harriman, Bloo does the same thing again, and the same thing happens again. This is like the 6th time. And then he does the most pettiest thing on the planet.
By the way, this is your toothbrush.
This would have been my breaking point. I would have fought. But then for a few minutes, it felt like there was going to be some extreme amount of karma built up for Bendy. Bloo absolutely bodies him with a series of chops that progressively made Bendy's situation worse. I personally love the fake photo print that stuck to Bendy's hand and then the exploding marker. It's like he took a few pages from Kevin's book, but without the series of attempted murders. This whole scene was just an absolute marvel to watch. And with that, the house is absolutely destroyed, and Bendy was dead smack in the center. It's over, he about to get put out, and all Bloo has to do is just blame Bendy.
Yeah, I set up the camera, I put glue on the photo, I sabotaged the marker, I loosened the faucet handles, I clogged the drain, I backed up the pipe system, so I could expose him for the fraud he is.
Bendy never appeared in another episode, and judging from the reception from most fans and critics, yeah, for a good reason. The episode was so incredibly panned that they had to issue an apology on behalf of the team. This would have been a normal episode if they compressed the plot to only revolve around Bloo being the only one on Bendy's reticle, given that he'd be the most believable fall guy for Bendy's shenanigans. The rest, they just absolutely don't make sense, and that's the reason why this episode just completely falls apart. Man, I'm just saying, if you somehow happen to believe this yellow mutated Charlie Brown over quite literally the nicest imaginary friend in the entire building, then you immediately lost me. And it makes even less sense when the prior episode was about Wilt's inability to turn down everyone's overwhelming and sometimes ridiculous requests because he always puts others before his own needs. Yeah, Bendy gets no real accountability, and Frankie and Mr. Harriman were pretty much the absolute worst. Everything he done pretty much outweighed Bendy's transgressions because Bloo fessed up to everything. And in a more likely situation, Bloo would probably never do that. And I get it, that's the joke, but it's not a good joke. It's pretty bad. It's a shame, really. I think there would have been something unique to Bendy if they handled his character just a little bit better. Nah, go watch Imposters Home for Make 'em Up Pals. Way better episode. Yeah, poor Bendy is no longer canon, and nothing of value is lost. F you, Bendy. Just remember this one lesson, kids. If you grovel enough to your parents, likely you'll never get in trouble. That still works, right? No? Well, you can always try running, but if your parents took track, I'm so sorry.